Peace, love, and Reiki. This is Rachel Goldberg here with Phyllis Furumoto for another wonderful 90-minute session of Global Reiki webinars. Those of you who are with us live, please go ahead and type into the chat. Let us know that you are here with us. And today we're going to be talking about age, and specifically, does age matter when it comes to Reiki? And Phyllis will go into that much more in her opening remarks shortly. And for everyone, I'm just pausing for a moment because I don't see anybody here in the chat. Oh, so I do see that we've got, yay, hello, Savannah. And I do see that there are people live in the room that just populated. Oh, here they all come. Hi, Susan. Hi, Virginia. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Janie. Hi, Christine. Feel free while you're introducing yourselves to let us know where you're joining us from. This truly is a global community. And for anyone who is new to us and to what this project is, Global Reiki Webinars is a project that Phyllis and I started very organically a couple of years ago. And it's an opportunity for members of the Global Reiki community. So that is anyone who practices Reiki of any form anywhere in the world, who is interested in connecting with community and also in hearing Phyllis Furumoto, who is the Grandmaster and lineage bearer of Usui Shiki Ryoho, which is a lineage of Reiki that comes through Japan, through Mikao Usui, Chijiro Hayashi, Hawayo Takata, who is also Phyllis's grandmother, and Phyllis is recognized now as the lineage bearer. And we've been doing these webinars for quite some time now. Every 4 to 6 weeks, it's a free public broadcast for the Global Reiki community, and we take questions in advance, and Phyllis answers them, and we have a conversation. And for those of you who are with us live, you're always welcome to join in the chat and be in the conversation. And for everyone else, if you found this video sometime in the future on YouTube, hey, glad you're here with us in this this time-space continuum that is the internet. And feel free to join the discussion that is still happening over in our Facebook group, which is called Global Reiki Webinars. So if you just go in Facebook and type in Global Reiki Webinars, you'll find us and can write in your own questions or reflections about anything you hear today or on any of our other videos that you find. There are quite a few, and start to connect with this wonderful community who we have here today. Carlos in Argentina. Hey, Carlos. Hey, Bonnie in Lakeport, California. Hello, Adriana in Argentina. Sally in Australia. Hello, Mouse in Chicago. Hello, Denise in Massachusetts. Elizabeth in Albuquerque. Ontario, Canada, San Francisco, quite a few folks from Australia today. And we're so glad that all of you are here. And yeah, those of you who are with us live, if you happen to have any trouble throughout the recording, the best thing that you can do is to refresh your web browser. And if you still have trouble, just log back in the way that you did to get here in the first place. The other announcement is that we do accept gifts. This is a project that we offer from the heart and want to continue to make these experiences and this community experience free for you and for other members of the Global Reiki community. And so we have a PayPal account that is just set to the email reikiwebinars@gmail.com. And those of you who are with us live, I'll post up a little button that if you click on it, it'll open a link in a different tab, so it won't take you away from the broadcast at all. You can look at it later and just choose to send a gift if you feel called to do so. And we greatly appreciate it. It allows us to cover our expenses and compensate ourselves and just feel your appreciation and do it from a full cup. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Phyllis for opening Reiki and opening remarks.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here again today. I want you to just locate me. I'm on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. So I noticed that there are a couple of people from Canada. So I'm in Canada. And for the last year or two, I've been wanting to wanting to move to Canada sometimes, just because of lots of different possibilities. And now I get to be here and live here for the summer. I'm here because my partner and I, Joyce, are going to cruise this passage between the mainland of British Columbia and Vancouver Island. And with all these little islands, and lots of old and dear friends live in these islands, and now I get to visit them at home. So that's very exciting for me. It is, however, 60 degrees here. This is the high, usually, during the day. And at my house in Arizona, it's 100 or over. So I'm wrapped up in a blanket with the fireplace on. And everybody thinks I'm a real temperature wimp, which I am. So this is how cold it gets at our place in winter. So it's been a wonderful time. Lots of green and lots of water. So it's a really beautiful place to be. All right. So I'd like to just invite us all to join in Reiki. You can place your hands anywhere on your body that you wish, or however your practice teaches you to give yourself Reiki. Let's join together, closing your eyes, so that we can use our inner sight to find ourselves in the same place, like somewhere on our beautiful planet, together in a circle. Thank you. Oh, it's lovely to be with you. So happy. Well, today, I just also like to say that Rachel and I have taken some of the suggestions from listeners and from participants of the Global Reiki webinars and used them as topic matters for our webinars this year. And this is one that came, does age matter when becoming a Reiki student? And a lot of these questions came from Australia and that part of the world. And so I don't know why, but it just seemed like this was a really good topic and something that we don't talk about very much. And the really neat thing is we were able to set this so that people from another part of the world could be with us live. So I'm really happy to see all the people from Australia here. In the beginning, I was confused sometimes by watching Hawaii Takata and the way that she decided if she would accept someone into her classes. It seemed not to matter about age. The criteria was more about whether the parents of a child were practicing Reiki, or if the child were able to pay for the class. And so there were a lot of different conversations that happened, and I couldn't work out a pattern, which is my usual strategy. And a strategy that allowed me to discern what her actual philosophy or what her actual practice was. So some years after that, accumulating my own experiences and understandings about the definition of Reiki practice, I came to understand more of her process. So my opinion, I believe that she assessed the person who wanted to learn Reiki and then felt whether they could be a good student. By good, I mean that the person would know what becoming a Reiki student meant for them, and that they were willing and able to practice faithfully, and that they would have support for their practice. So in adult, she would always set up another group after the Reiki class and after she left, where people would get together and practice on themselves and on each other. And this was their support. But for children, she really wanted to have the parents be able to support their children in Reiki practice. When I started teaching, there were also people who were interested and asked if they would benefit from practice since they hadn't many years to live. And I used to tell them always it didn't really matter. Hawaii Takata, when she, it was interesting because there were two groups of people who she initiated as Reiki masters. One was a group of people who were retired and had adult children and were kind of looking for what we might call now a second career. And then there were the others of us who were very young, in our 30s, who hadn't had children yet and who didn't have children at the time, usually. And we were also a part of her Reiki Master Circle. So this was interesting for me, and I took that on board and thought about that a little bit. When people would ask, am I too old? What I realized after a while is that we don't know how long we're going to live, none of us. A 12-year-old could live another 20 years, or another 50 years, or another 70 years. Something that happened to me that was very clearly a message, sort of, about age for me was that there was this young woman who had several children of young age, and she was pregnant, and she went in and into the hospital because they anticipated a very difficult birth. And during the birth, the mother died in the hospital. Several days after the child was born, she had lots of Reiki. She was very grateful for Reiki, and she had only had Reiki for a couple of years. But for her, she said there was a quality about this time of childbirth and her knowing that she wasn't going to be able to accompany her children growing up. And that Reiki gave her a quality of relationship that she so treasured. And from this conversation, what I realized is that we never know how long we have, and it doesn't actually matter. The point is, when we practice, what is it that we're going to get out of our practice? And what is it that we're actually doing? So this is a really fundamental question that maybe we'll talk about later. Also, the other part of this question about age, when I think about it, is my own social filters about age. Like some people said, well, I won't give second degree to anybody under 16 because they're not responsible enough. And what I got was that they were using the social expectation of a government to say, well, at 16 you can drive a car, so then you must be old enough to have second degree Reiki. And putting those two things together didn't really work for me. Then somebody said, no, it has to be 18 because that's the age in most places where people are allowed to go into a bar and drink alcohol, which I thought was also a very strange connection with Reiki. And then someone said, but what about, the age of maturity? Like, we all think about 21 as being this passage, or we used to, maybe in the old days when I was young, we used to think 21 was this age of passage where you went from being a teenager and young adult to being an adult in 21. So the question for me that I ended up with was, well, what is the age of anyone, any human being who wants to have a spiritual practice? And, I look not only in Reiki, but outside of Reiki. There was this young woman who's a daughter of a dear friend of mine, and her parents didn't go to church, but somehow in school, or I don't know how this actually happened, through her friends, she decided to start going to school, to church when she was about 14. And when she was 16, she decided to become a member of the church and be baptized. And she asked me to be there. And I talked to her about why she was becoming a member of a church and what the process was for her. And she said, well, I just want to be a better person. Well, I couldn't argue with that. And I thought, it just really touched me. It's like she said, when I grow up, I want to be the best parent I can be. And for that, I need to be able to understand what being a good person is. So it was really touching and really influenced me, because I realized at that point that my idea about a 16-year-old girl who was really into Pink and, the modern music and everything, also had these very deep, important philosophic thoughts. So then I thought about, well, what about Reiki? And I just remember this 5-year-old girl, about the second or third year I began to teach Reiki, and her parents were practicing Reiki. Her mother especially was a very avid Reiki person. And she came up to me and she said, I've been practicing Reiki for 2 years now, and now I want to be initiated. And we had a talk. She had saved up Christmas money and other kinds of money that she had received as gifts or that she had earned, and she could pay for it herself. And there was no reason to say no. So I said yes. And, I don't know where she is nowadays. I don't know what Reiki has been to her in her life. But I do know in that moment, I felt like I was speaking to a human being who was making a conscious choice. And making a conscious choice, just like that 16-year-old was making a conscious choice. This 5-year-old said, my mom gives me Reiki all the time. And it's important for me that I be fully initiated so that I can give her Reiki when she's worried or when she's crying or when she's just not happy. And again, I couldn't say no. And she joined a class. I don't teach separate classes for children. And she was an amazing student in those young days when I was with her. So I wouldn't do it for every 5-year-old, but I feel like there's a lot of filters that Reiki has made me think about. And, if somebody had just asked me as a hypothetical question, would you ever initiate a 5-year-old? I probably would have said, no, are you kidding me? But in that moment, she wasn't 5. She was a human being asking for something that I could give her. And that I felt like she was asking out of consciousness, and I was saying yes out of consciousness. So this brings me to a whole nother level of thinking about age, and that is the question comes to me: what is the meaning of our existence here on Earth? We all are human beings, and I believe that Reiki gives us the understanding, or maybe even the experience, that when we die, our spirit or somehow our essence lives, isn't destroyed. It just our physical body goes away, and this essence of ourselves goes someplace. And like maybe we don't go anywhere, like go travel, but maybe we just stay in the space. So that's just a whole nother raft of questions. But what I really loved when I looked at the dictionary was the definition of age: a period of human life measured by years from birth, usually marked by a certain stage or degree of mental or physical development, and often involving legal responsibility and capacity. It's an interesting addition. Age can be a particular period of life at which a person becomes naturally or conventionally qualified or disqualified for anything. And when I read that, I thought, somehow we have structured our existence here on Earth as a kind of top-down empowerment. And this is what we have gotten socially. And I feel like today we mostly look at age as something that we become qualified for, or we aren't qualified, for instance, to drive anymore. Like, lately I've been filling out rental car forms, and it says, "Are you over 70?" And in August I'll be 70, and it just scares me because I think, oh, maybe then they won't rent a car for me, and that would be really upsetting for me. So it's just really interesting when I think about the way tribes used to bring up, and this is my understanding, I don't know, I wasn't there 300 or 400 years ago, but in the Aboriginal cultures, you're born and then you move naturally into different phases as your body matures and as you mature. And they didn't seem, they had a certain, they seemed to have certain things that they were looking for in a person. But if a person was different or had a different rhythm than usual, then they also very much honored that. And that would be really an interesting process to go into, because I really feel that what happens in Reiki is this, that people come to Reiki as a practice. They don't think about it as a spiritual practice or as a practice that might change their life. They come because their child is sick and they want to give the child Reiki, or their dog is sick, or they're looking for another option for treatment of cancer, or there's some kind of everyday reason for them to take Reiki. But then as they practice and as they develop, there's this deeper understanding that grows, and that we expand out into what is it really like to be a human being? And is this an adventure that my spirit is having? And I get to go through each of these different levels of development marked by a certain age, and that will take me into an experiential process that when I die, I'm able to contribute that wisdom and that understanding to the oneness. So I've just been thinking about this over the last week, especially because I knew that we were going to do this webinar. And so I've come from, can I initiate a 5-year-old girl, to what did that really mean? And what does it mean for me when I make a judgment about somebody just based on age? So these are, for me, the levels of questioning that I have. And perhaps the questions that are going to come up now will unfold and bring us more levels. So, Rachel?
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Phyllis. So the questions that we have, for those of you who are not with us live and are wondering how you could be or how you could submit questions in advance and be part of this, if you join our Facebook group, anytime there's a webinar, we post it. And at the end of the registration process, there's an opportunity to submit these questions. So I'm going to go ahead and read the questions, and we'll hear Phyllis's response. Our first question tonight comes from Riaz, and Riaz wrote, "At what age is the human body ready to receive Reiki initiations?"
I just love this question because it evoked two totally separate responses in me. The one response was, why would you ask that question? And then after thinking about it, I got to thinking, well, why not? And so I've gone through a lot of processing with this particular question. And where I came to was this. We are all born in Reiki. Reiki, the energy, is everywhere. It's universal life energy. And so the human body has Reiki already. We live in Reiki, through Reiki, with Reiki. So there isn't any preparation that the human body needs to have because it's already imbued with Reiki, the energy. So what Riaz is asking is the physical body receiving something that it doesn't have already? And if that's so, does the age of that body have something to do with it? So because he said human body and not human, this really separated a lot of my thoughts about this. So he didn't say at what age is a person ready to receive Reiki initiations. Totally different question for me. So at any age, I believe the human body can receive Reiki initiations. Because I believe that when I initiate someone, I am like reminding the body and reminding that human being, the being inside, that Reiki has been with us, that Reiki is with us, and that we just need to be reminded with a big R that we have it. And once we become conscious of it, it moves from automatic level of, yes, we breathe and I don't have to think about it. Yes, I have Reiki, but I don't have to think about it. To, yes, I have Reiki and I'm going to think about it and I'm going to consciously choose to practice Reiki. That is the difference between, for me, a being that's ready to receive Reiki initiations. So that's my response. And I'm really interested, Rachel, if you have something to add.
Well, thank you for asking. I don't have much to add. I agree with what you said and liked the way that you took us on your thought process and the different ways to consider the question. I have an experience where in one of my Reiki classes, I once had a woman who was pregnant, and part of her initiation, after her initiation, we actually talked about it and also initiated her little one. And so growing up, this little one and her had this connection in the way that when Phyllis was talking about the one woman who was able to connect with her children in this really special way. That's not something that I would do or advertise as I wouldn't put it out as a thing to attract, but it felt appropriate in the moment. And certainly knowing this little boy, it suits him and suits his family. And I feel a sense of comfort having that experience, and also in hearing Phyllis talk through the process and your recollection of what it seemed like the pattern with Hawaii Takata being that will this child or this person, whether or not it is a child, have support? And that helps me better understand my own thinking and intuition and on past experiences. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Our next question came from Patty. And Patty wrote, how young is too young to become a Reiki student?
Well, this is a great next question. So again, I'm in awe of how these questions come to us and how perfectly they form a sort of a flow of energy. So for me, what she's asking is about the actual Reiki practice. So in the first question, I was speaking about Reiki the energy. In the second question, I'm speaking about Reiki the practice. So Reiki the practice for me takes consciousness. It's a conscious choice. And I believe that young children can make conscious choices about whether or not they want to have Reiki. I had this friend of mine who's a Reiki master, and from when his son was very little, he just did not want to have Reiki. And it was so sad for his dad. But it was like this child knew that he didn't want to have Reiki and has since, now he's an adult and, it's a different story now, but he grew into it and he had to work out, I believe, some of his misgivings or some of his concerns, like internally, in order to say yes. So I don't use age for myself as like a qualifier for whether or not somebody can come and join my class. I talk to them and I make sure that I feel like it's a conscious decision on their part, that they have support if they're young from an adult in their life who's with them daily. And I make sure that it's really coming from them, not from a parent or a grandparent who wants them to be a Reiki student. Because, this is not the only path, and this is not the only way to find a spiritual connection. So I have seen in my own life young children be forced, for instance, to attend the Catholic Church or to go to some other religious service, and that it's not for them. And still they are forced to do that and are not able to make a conscious choice to do that. And I feel that piece has been a really important part of our growing as human beings, to be honored that we are human beings and we have consciousness, and that we are asked and supported in making conscious decisions, and especially about a practice that will nurture our spiritual development. So that's the response I have. And Rachel, do you have something you'd like to add?
I just feel very open in this moment and appreciative of what you're sharing. And I've just been in a space personally of reflecting on my own spiritual path and the different practices and traditions that have influenced me, including in my childhood. And for me, I'm in a place of embracing more, more intimately than I ever have my inherited spiritual tradition, and also know that I had to come to a place where I really was choosing it. A lot of my early adulthood was discerning, what do I really think about all this? So you've shared a lot that is just supporting more turning for me in this moment.
Yeah, great.
Our next question comes from Nikki. And Nikki wrote, to me, there is never an age limit for Reiki, ever. My goodness, look at the age of Usui Sensei and Mrs. Takata Sensei and Hayashi Sensei. I myself am 68 and have been studying Reiki for over 20 years. I have not yet taught young ones officially. They come with a built-in sense of energy and lightness.
Thanks, Nikki. This for me just borders on this kind of edge of can we step into this dimension where we realize that time space is something that human beings have invented to somehow count, and that when we step out of that dimension into time space spectrum, which is we might even think about it as a void because we wouldn't have any constrictions, then there are no limits, because there's no way to determine a limit, because there's no age. So I find this question really interesting. That's not really a question, but an observation. Thanks.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Would
Okay.
you,
Sure.
You're able to take them now? So Kathy asked us, hi Kathy, glad you're here and thanks for writing in a question. What sorts of questions do you ask of anyone seeking initiation?
What brings you to Reiki? What do you anticipate receiving from this practice? What do you feel like I will give you? Can you imagine practicing this for the rest of your life? Those are a few, but it would really depend on the person and the circumstance.
I love that. When I took my first Reiki class, and so because it was taught to me in this way when I began teaching, I did it in this way, which was just to get on the schedule at a yoga studio and be a teacher to who shows up. And then there came a time when I felt like I'm going to, really make this my work and take it a little more seriously. And I started having a process where I would meet and talk with potential students. And our conversations involved a lot of what you just said. So again, I'm feeling some reassurance and some peace in hearing what you're saying.
Great.
Our other question that came in tonight, or this morning, depending where you are in the world, is from Susan. Hi, Susan. And she asks, or says and asks, lately I have become increasingly convinced that Reiki should first and foremost be used as a personal practice rather than a way to treat others or as a career option. Rather initiate others so that they can take responsibility for their own healing and spiritual growth. What is your opinion of this, Phyllis?
I excuse me. I couldn't really say that this was an opinion. This is my practice. And the practice that I share with the students is that this is not a career opportunity. This is a folk art, and it is given to those who are sincere in wanting to practice Reiki, wanting to wanting to have deeper knowledge or more knowledge about themselves as human beings and so on. And sometimes, that's not even on the conscious surface, but you can tell, I think, from a person whether or not they are sincere. This is the word that I would use. And there has been some shift about this, where people think that the Reiki that is being taught now is kind of a professional course, which it is not. It's really a folk art, and it will take years and years of development before a professional option is available for any Reiki student. So this isn't an opinion of mine as much as it is just a reflection of my practice.
Thank you.
I hope that was clear.
It is.
Okay, great.
So our next question that came in advance is from Carlos, who I believe is also with us now. And Carlos wrote, probably there is no one too old or too old to start as Reiki student. I initiated a woman who was over 85 years old, many years ago, and she enjoyed several years of practicing. What about being too young? My personal opinion is that any student should be able to choose and have awareness that is entering into a practice. Then, what is the meaning of this awareness? Did we all have this awareness, no matter how old we were, when we were initiated into Reiki? Are there any boundaries?
Right.
A lot of questions.
A lot of questions, but what it brings me back to is my own story. I was initiated when I was a child. I was not in a class. My mother had asked my grandmother not to mention the word Reiki in our household, so we didn't know that this was Reiki, but she initiated us. And so the initiation had nowhere to go. Like, there was no, what I call, fertile ground for this to fall on. And there was not a conscious choice for me. So when I was 30, I was really casting around for something to do, like a vocation for my life. And at the same time, my grandmother was wanting to come out of retirement and teach again. She's only in retirement for a few months. So I totally understand, now that I'm almost 70, that I can't imagine retiring, right? So my mother called up and said, would you like to go and be with your grandmother for 3 or 4 months during the summer as she teaches Reiki? And, my grandmother and I didn't have a very easy relationship. So it wasn't something like, oh, yes, I'll go because I love my grandmother so much and it'll be so much fun. That was not an option. So it really, because of my difficult relationship with my grandmother, I had to really stop and think, well, do I want to do this? Am I putting myself into the lion's mouth, in deciding this and so on? And it took me 4 months to make a decision. And I believe that it wasn't conscious, but I was aware that this decision was going to change my life, and it did. Because I went on this teaching trip, I was initiated as a master, and for years after that, I was really jealous of all other people in the world, who had chosen to do a Reiki class, number one, and had chosen to do second degree, and who had chosen to become a master, however that ensued. And because there was consciousness about it, and I felt really, on some level, angry with my grandmother because she didn't allow me to have this consciousness. And then one day in the group of masters, I said, well, you all knew what you were getting into, and I didn't. And everybody looked around at each other and went, are you kidding me? We had no idea what we were getting into. And at that point, I realized, oh, this 4 months that I tried, that I really wanted to make this decision and went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, I realized that there was an internal piece of me that said yes immediately when my mother asked me about it. And my surface consciousness of concern about will I spend all day arguing with my grandmother? Will I be able to really support her, or will this be a really bad experience? Will I be a failure because I'll have to come home early because my grandmother will kick me out of the trip, and all these different concerns. And so I realized that when I was initiated as a master, I sat in that chair. And for me, that's a sign of consciousness on some level. And then the next year after that, I went off on a trip of my own to just answer the question, are you choosing this for yourself? And I came back and I thought to myself, well, I chose it. I've lived it for a year, and now I'm recognizing it, and I'm saying yes. So I believe that awareness is really a great word here, because I felt like I was aware. I just couldn't put it into words. And I definitely didn't know all the information, so I don't know if I would have been conscious of it. But there was some decision that I made that felt like I could join the rest of my colleagues as masters, and I could join the rest of the Reiki community in general, because after talking to many, many people, almost everybody says, if I had known, where Reiki would take me, I don't know if I would have said yes. And we all did. And here we are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I was muted, but I was laughing a lot when you shared the story of saying, you all knew what you were getting into. And
You're right,
said,
exactly.
Oh, yeah. Our next question comes from Anne, and Anne wrote, I was attuned to Reiki 1, Usui Shiki Ryoho, in my early 20s. I took the class together with my mother, and it was a beautiful experience. Then, over the years, Reiki sort of slipped my mind, and I didn't use it regularly for almost 20 years. I have absolutely no idea where my certificate has gone. Then, 3 years ago, I met Reiki again and a new master. And after being attuned to second degree, I have one overwhelming experience after the other, all the time. I'm sad for the years I didn't use Reiki, and I feel that I have wasted the time, even though it was probably meant to be that way. Has Reiki been working in me while I was unaware about it? I sometimes get the feeling that I send Reiki just thinking I must remember to send Reiki to this, and then don't because I forgot all about it, because profound results are happening. For example, a friend thanking me to distant heal her husband's legs. She forgot to tell her husband that he was going to be healed, and I forgot to actually send Reiki, just thought that I would, and the problem with the legs completely went away. This being just one example out of many, I'm puzzled.
Well, when I think about the first question, it's like, it never occurred to me to ask, did I waste time uh, in not being more conscious about my Reiki? That's just how things were. And I feel, and that um, we have Reiki within us, and we use it whether we are conscious, whether we consciously choose it or not. And I don't know what you mean by didn't use Reiki, like do self treatment or treat other people or whatever. However, I believe that in my life, um, I was at the right time in the right place for my mother to call me and say, will you go on this trip with your grandmother? And I just feel like I followed my path. I was there at the right moment. I picked up the phone and I started on, and I started a new journey, but this was a journey of consciousness. And this is what you've done. You've just, now you're conscious. And it just opens your eyes to that we live in a world of miracles, really. Um, I think that some of us get a little jaded, and that means get a little used to having miracles, because that just becomes a part of our everyday life. And I see other people around me having these experiences of life being very difficult because connections aren't being made, because they're not willing to wait, or or they wait too long, or somehow they're not in the right place at the right time, so to speak. And this journey that that Joyce and I have been on in the last 2.5, 3 months with this boat. And let me tell you, this boat really has energy. Um, we had the plan, right? We had a very, very together plan. And that plan just kept getting broken down until the boat decided when it was going to leave Arizona a month later than we had planned. The boat decided, where it was going to be. And now, yesterday, after talking to this marina a couple of 3 times and them saying, I'm sorry, we probably won't ever have any slips available to you because it's a busy season and we don't have very many slips available and so on. Joyce walked into the office yesterday and the woman said, I just hung up the phone. Somebody just canceled and you get the slip. So, right time, right place. And this process of time, space, dimension, and consciousness is really important. And I don't know the function of the whole thing with your friend's husband's legs, I think we've all have had those kinds of experiences before. And there's no logical explanation because it isn't logical. So what's important is not to take it for granted, but to keep with the practice, whatever the practice is, and whatever the practice has been that you've been taught, and just keep doing the practice, because the practice is not the means to an end. It's a way to unlock a door. So it's the practice is not a means to an end. It is a way to unlock a door. So when I give treatments, I still do the same hand positions that I was taught umpteen years ago by my master. And that's my basic treatment. It isn't that I don't vary it or I don't follow Reiki or, I can't choose something different, but that's always where I start from inside of myself. And that kind of practice opens this doorway to an amazing array of experiences that our life is willing to offer us. And you're experiencing that, Anne, now. And so you are prepared. Maybe it was taking Reiki 20 years ago with your mother. I have no idea. But I just trust your path. I trust my path. And we just walk our path. And that, for me, is the bottom line here. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I'm going to go into our next question. The only other piece, actually, before going to the next question, that was a thought I had about what Anne wrote, was about, you worded after your second degree attunement. How did Anne word it? She said, you're having one overwhelming experience after the other all the time. And I just wanted to say that in my own experience, when I was receiving initiations, and in particular, second degree, and also what I seem to observe through my own lens of my own experience, as I witness the journey of other people, is that this is not only common, but I think part of the process of integrating the energy of an initiation or an attunement. These words are interchangeable. And that there's an integration that's happening. And so our sensitivity and our awareness is being attuned to different kinds of things. And there's a word that my master used when she described this process to us before our first level 1 initiation. And she used the word quickening, where there's sort of like, we have a rapid healing that's like, we have, signed up for something. And that means we're ready to let go of some other things. And in our actual, tangible situational lives, that can show up in a number of different ways. And so my practice has just been to, find humor when possible and to dance with it. And just sort of get used to that is part of the path, at least for me, of walking with Reiki. And each time I offer an initiation to a group of students or to one student, I'm going on that integration process all over again. So it's sort of just the dance of the path of the master. So our next question now came from Fatma, and Fatma wrote, having worked with children and families for years, I would feel influenced by the law of the land in terms of deciding an appropriate age for a child to learn Reiki, and this would have to be balanced with common sense and parental consent. In short, the age would be appropriate to the individual child's needs, aptitude, ability to understand their choice, and their own free will. Do you feel a standard for all public practitioners to follow would help us to operate in the public realm?
So this question brings me back to the question of what is it that we carry when we are Reiki students, or we're Reiki masters teaching a class. And for me, this is a folk art. And one of the richness of the folk art is that we don't have standards. We have a practice. And what I mean by that is that I watched Hawayo Takata and what she did. I adopted, because I wanted to emulate her, I adopted her way of teaching, her way of being as much as possible with the class. I made an effort to sort of understand why some of her decisions felt confusing for me, and I feel like that's been a teaching that has taken me a long time to suss out. So in teaching students of Reiki, we are on some level in the public realm, but we are not being professionals. We are not being public practitioners in the sense of treatment. The teaching of Reiki is really different for me than the actual layers of different layers or different ways of being with the public with treatment practice. So I don't know if, Fatima, you're mixing these two things up. And I agree with your influences, and I don't know any law of the land that says that a child has to be a certain age before they can take Reiki. So I think that we need to let that filter go, or maybe be aware of it, but also not let it be so influential that we actually don't listen to our own heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Kelly. And Kelly wrote, "My son is 7 and says he does not want Reiki yet. I am honoring his choice. He says he may want it at 8. Not really a question, but wanted to put it out there."
Well, Kelly, if you're a Reiki master, which I would assume you are, then what's important for your son is for him to be able to come to you. And so I don't know if you're asking him each year, is this a year? Or are you opening that space to him? I would, well, so I come to this juncture where there are several different realms of thought about this. So I give you all of them. So Wanya Tuan, who is a dear colleague of mine, my sister, because she was initiated as a master by Hawayo Takata, and I've been very close with her over the years. Her sense of legacy for her is Reiki. Like, this is what she can give her children, and she has given her children. She has some of them were initiated by Hawayo Takata, and then after Hawayo Takata died, eventually she initiated them as masters. And for her, this was a a way for her to pass on her legacy, what she could offer her children and her grandchildren in kind, and probably her great grandchildren. I think there's one coming soon. And there's another, and many people adhere to this. There's another camp or another idea about this, which for me is where I'm at, and maybe it's because I've been influenced by the way that I came to Reiki in a family, and that is that I always waited for. I always wait for people to come to me. I try not to encourage it, including relatives and so on, because I don't want to be. I don't want it to be a social decision. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but like sometimes friends say, "Should I take Reiki?" That's what you spend your whole life with, and I really like having friends who don't have Reiki because it gives me a sense of, not living in a monoculture, and so I don't encourage my friends to take Reiki. And they really have to come and insist. And then usually I have somebody else initiate them, because I would rather keep my relationship as a friend with them and not as a master. And these two things are very important to me. So I hope that your son feels that he has the right to decide whether he wants Reiki at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Jeannie. And Jeannie wrote, I know an adult who told me he became a Reiki master at the young age of 13. Today, he is a professional acupuncturist who doesn't have a Reiki practice at all. Is there such a thing as becoming a Reiki master too young?
Wow. I don't really know, because I decided on this particular philosophy a while ago. If I trust my own path, then I must trust the path of everyone else. So that included when I felt a dear friend of mine had gone and taken Reiki in another form. I was upset by that because I felt like at that time that my form was the best. So I felt like she didn't really get the best. But when I really looked at it, I realized that the master that she went to and the form that she came into Reiki with was perfect for her at the time. And the practice that I had wasn't actually that good a fit for her. And there was no master around to teach her anyway. So I just have to trust in people's paths. And Wanya's children, I know them. They're now, of course, adults and have their own children and grandchildren. And they're doing really well. I mean, I couldn't want anything more for them. So even though I wouldn't do what Wanya did, I don't think, I have to trust that we all have our path, and that path is not determined by appropriate age. And this is my filter that really I'm confronting right here, right now. Today, because we're talking about age, I really feel like this is a time for me to just let this go, because if he hadn't been a Reiki master at the age of 13, he might not be a professional acupuncturist. He might not have the kind of practice that he has, because Reiki guided him, or Reiki allowed him to understand who he was. And maybe the congruency of that was that he wasn't to teach Reiki, he was to become an acupuncturist. And that's so true for some of the other masters that I've taught. Some people are totally lifelong, seem like lifelong, committed to teaching Reiki. And those who were committed to teaching Reiki, I've had the experience of 2 of my master students becoming Buddhist nuns. I mean, of all things. And then somebody else becomes, goes back to being a dentist, and somebody else does this. And I see that in their life, that was really appropriate. So I feel like what Reiki is bringing them is a way to find their most congruent place in the world, to become who they really are and to have that expression. So I can't measure the too young part against what it looks like today, because it's I don't think the 2 of them go together. It's just our expectation that would like to see this 13-year-old master now teach, but it's not necessary for him. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have just one more question that came in advance.
Okay.
And it's possible that we'll have time to look at, it looks like there's at least one, maybe a couple of questions in the chat. We'll see where we're at when this one's complete. And this final question that came in advance is from Penny. And Penny wrote, "I don't believe age has anything to do with it. It is readiness and willingness to make the self-healing commitment."
It's really funny, because I just am reading this book that would totally agree with this philosophically, and I do on one level, and I just don't know how to tell whether somebody has the self-healing commitment. I feel like that particular realization of what we are practicing Reiki for comes often years later after first degree, sometimes decades later. So it's very interesting, on what level of consciousness is this commitment made on, and how far along in the path is somebody before they understand that this is why they made the commitment. So I'm reading this really interesting book. Well, I think it's interesting. Was given to me by a dear friend of mine whose son died from an accident, a construction accident, very young, in the prime of his life. And the name of the book is Conversations with Jerry and Other People Who I Thought Were Dead. And it's this medium who has interviewed people who have died and their experience of what it's like on the other side of the veil, I would say. And I just read this piece about that our path here on earth as each human being is the same because we are all one. And that path is to find the place within us, within each of us, and so within us as a what's the word? Us as a community of loving self-love, of accepting ourselves totally, utterly, without any condition. And I feel that this is what Penny is speaking about, that we bring this experience into our oneness. And I always thought that maybe oneness would have this experience for me to go back to, but maybe there is something for me to take back to that experience. So this is where I am in the book, and stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Would you like to take a look at what's coming in on the chat?
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
The first one that came, I think Kathy sent a second question. Yeah, she said, what are your thoughts on initiating animals or other forms of life? And Kathleen said, I love Kathy's question on initiating animals and other life forms, and would also love to hear your thoughts on this. It does seem to have a connection to the question of consciously pursuing and accepting Reiki initiation.
I was taught that animals are in their own world, separate from us. That doesn't mean less, it just means separate. And that they actually don't need to be initiated in Reiki. It wasn't said that they could be or that they might need to be, but that they don't need it because it's not part of their path, I guess. This is the path part is my own connection. And I, in being with this question over and over again, because I have it asked a lot, that is that I believe animals have what can I say? Their gift to us is that they accept their lives totally and who they are totally. And I believe that that's a gift for us, that if we could accept who we are totally and accept our lives totally, then we would live in peace, not necessarily without.
I think.
Again, this is one of these things where Reiki, the energy, has a different parameters than Reiki, the practice. So we all have Reiki come through us. And in the early days, before Reiki was so prevalent, I really loved massage, and I used to have massages all the time. And when I traveled, I often would find a great massage therapist, and often they wouldn't have Reiki. But when they gave me a massage, I could feel an energy that I would call Reiki. And eventually, after talking to a couple of these people, what I realized was that because they were opening themselves up to Reiki or to universal life energy and to say, support me in this work that I'm doing. All bodywork people do this mostly. And when they do that, Reiki comes through them, and they actually choose it on a conscious level. They aren't initiated, so that's Reiki the energy. And I believe that happens with all massage therapists who have Reiki. That I can, it's discernible because the touch is different. And then the Reiki practice, you're not treating people with Reiki because you're not doing Reiki practice, which looks like this. Well, for me, it looks like this with my hands still. So, and you're not practicing Reiki, but some people like to consciously include Reiki, like at the end of a treatment, they'll have their hands be still over somebody's eyes or at the top of their head or on their shoulders. So then they are actually adding Reiki practice to their massage. So I hope that this is clear enough for you to differentiate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're complete with our questions.
Great.
And I'll read for everyone watching the recording or who is with us live but on their phone and not able to actually see the chat. Denise wrote earlier, one of the greatest things that I learned from you, Phyllis, is respect and acceptance. I am so grateful for your teaching. Thank you. So we're going to close with Reiki in just a moment. And I want to say thank you to Phyllis and to everyone who's with us live and to you in the future watching this. Thank you for being here. We feel your energetic presence. Thank you to each of the people who have sent us a monetary gift through the PayPal link. We really appreciate that. And if you are watching this on YouTube, that link to send a donation to Global Reiki Webinars through PayPal is in the description of this video. So for the next few minutes, let's close with Reiki, self-treatment, whatever that looks like in your practice. And another option that you are also invited to do if this feels exciting to you is if distance Reiki is part of your practice, to send distance Reiki to our collective highest purpose. I feel like time just pauses when we do this. Feel free to continue on with your Reiki practice. We are going to close the broadcast in a moment. And until next time, peace, love, and Reiki.
Thank you. Bye-bye.